Josh. I'm a hamster trainer. No, played well. I I'm excited to be here. This is like the third year I've been down here, and third time I think I've been to University of Texas Arlington, and always had a great experience. And so far, that has not held true. That no, you guys are great so far. Uh, this topic is very, very important to me. It's near and dear to my heart. I lost my father to suicide in 2009. I was 25. I'm 33 now. In case you were considering doing math, don't worry about it. I'm 33. My father at the time was 60. And so I want to talk a little bit about that for a moment, but then before I do that, I want to kind of talk about structure, what we're going to do, how this is going to work, and maybe just a couple pieces of housekeeping. So I've been speaking kind of as a standalone speaker for almost 7 years, and I think I just gave my 250th presentation in the last month or two. And what I found over the past couple of years is that just being a straight up speaker isn't getting it done. You know, I mean, I have good experiences, my audience has good experiences, but I want people to walk away with something and walk faster, with their feet in a different way. And so people learn in different ways. And when it's just straight up lecture, you retain like 3% of that knowledge on average. So what we have here, what we're going to do after I do a little bit of talking, is it's really going to be a big group facilitated discussion. Why? It's not because I'm lazy and don't feel like talking, although that's happened. No, it's because I respect and honor and value your opinions and ideas and your frames of reference, because every school culture is different, every social work program is different. This programming, I've adapted it for grades 6 through 12, college, undergrad, staff trainings. I'm doing a ton in California, so it's going to look similar but different. And so I often start this off in this way, and even say it's the same thing to sixth graders, because everybody is my teacher, and so not only am I the guy facilitating and teaching, but I also get to learn as well. And I think that's how we have a better interaction experience. There's going to be a brief-ish improv, and that's only going to be between me, and only. So there's going to be a brief improv, and that's going to be how to intervene with a client who may be suicidal. So you actually get some tangible, something to look at, and it's an improv. And I think it's really important because I think it makes it a little more palatable, something that's still scary and uncomfortable even for me, admittedly so. It'll just be a different beast, So I think that's kind of it. And the other thing is, there might be some vulnerability in the room as we kind of move forward. And so what happens is the room stays in the room, otherwise it's gossip, unless the solution's oriented as gossip. I don't think I need to go any further with that. And as far as interaction, don't worry about having to look good or anything in front of your peers, your fellow, classmates, because there's no stupid questions or stupid answers. Really, there's just stupid people. I mean, no. I mess that up all the time. There's none of that. There's been a few times where in different trainings there's been some very questionable answers, some even maybe sometimes dangerous answers, and it's a teaching moment. It's a teaching moment because we learn from moments of discomfort and falling flat on our face a bit more than when we learn from success. So that's that. Moving right along. So why would somebody get involved? Well, I kind of told you my dad died by suicide. And so it kind of started when I was a young person. And I think this is important for y'all to hear this, because I don't know how often people are open and honest about this kind of stuff, who've experienced and gone through it. And so I think that's important for some knowledge base going forward as you start to work with clients, maybe do hours. Take what you like and leave the rest. My experience isn't going to be like be all end all, right? But so I started as a young man, at a young age. I grew up in New Jersey. Please don't hold it against me. It's not my fault. I had an okay experience, and the capital. And so we looked, for all intents and purposes, like, I don't know, whatever normal means, but I don't know really what that means, but this Wonder Bread America, sort of 3 kids, 2 parents who were together, we went to church like 6 times a week, like, family didn't know about the word moderation, so it was a lot. and we were like involved in community and stuff. So we looked kind of like, I guess, normal, but beyond every white picket fence, and we couldn't afford the fence. We just had to paint. We were pretty poor. So things were rough, but behind every white picket fence, you never know what's on the other side. And so we had a lot of skeletons in our closet. Two big ones. One was that my father was an abuser. He was verbally abusive. Took pretty much all of us. I got the brunt of it. Told at a young age a lot of different things that a young person shouldn't hear about who they are and what they desire to be. And yeah, you're good. You can just go ahead. No, you're good. It's all right. No. No, you're good. You're good.
Sorry.
It's all good. I'm a sarcastic person, but I don't mean to. So I hope I didn't ruin that experience. I mean that. So Dad was an abuser, physically with me especially, and verbally as well. And so, think about a young person's brain being wrapped around trauma, and how that changes the chemistry, and maybe what's going to happen next, right? So that happened, and then as a 12-year-old, my mom pulled my sister and I aside. She was 13, I was 12. My brother was about 5 years younger, so he didn't get this information. My mom was like, I got a secret to tell you. Your dad doesn't want you guys to know. Your dad's father took his life in the 60s, and your dad was 17. Now go run along. That's kind of why your dad's like that. And that was it. And that stuck with me, and that was really difficult. Like, I just didn't know how to deal with that. And then, fast forward to age 19, I wanted to escape home, so I did. And I did what many people with a bad childhood do. I became a professional actor. And that was finally that one. Kids don't understand that. So I did that. I was doing well with that. I was writing musicals and plays, and one of the plays is still running. And I was doing voiceover, and things were going well-ish for a while. And then 24, my parents were going through this divorce. My mom was over it. They'd been married for like 29, 30 years and unhappy for almost every single day of that marriage. And so my brother finally leaves, so she bounced. And so my dad, this gruff, aggressive guy, turned inward on himself pretty quickly. And on the day they were supposed to finalize the divorce, March 31, 2009, he took his life. And I didn't like the man, but I didn't want him to die. So my life was going like this, and then it takes this left turn. So I had this creative response to that, and that was really good, and I was that was helping me a little bit, but I still didn't quite get everything that was going on. And beginning of 2011, about 20 months after my dad passed away, I was in intense suicidal crisis myself. My dad was gone at this point for, like I said, 20 months. My mom, who had always sort of been a decent parent, sued me, my brother and sister, for the inheritance my dad left us. And my girlfriend of 6 years I lived with decided to leave as well. So I lost 3 major people all at one time. I didn't know this at the time. I know it now. I had a lot of major change all at once. It can be a catalyst for suicidal thinking. And it was certainly for me. On top of that, I was living my entire life with this thing that I didn't quite understand. I'd be sad for I remember as young as 8, being sad for a week, 2 weeks, sometimes a month at a time, sometimes multiple times a year. I had no vocabulary to talk about it. I didn't understand it. I didn't think it was normal. I thought I was weird for having these feelings. I learned later that it's depression. I was living with major clinical depression, which I know how to manage to a decent degree at this point. And it's always a learning process on the fly every day. But the symptoms of this thing that I didn't know what to call were blowing up in the beginning of 2011. This really dark 6-week period where I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I was crying all the time, couldn't go anywhere, do anything, I was losing my work that I had. And on top of that, I started to think about suicide in the beginning of the 6-week period, weekly, daily, hourly, by the minute, until the point I was at my 4th floor window, holding myself halfway out, thinking of jumping into my life, because I thought I was a burden. Nobody cared about me. Nobody loved me. I didn't feel like I was listened to. Nobody saw me. Nobody heard me. I was isolating. I wasn't in my right mind either. So I was desperate. I felt alone. So about an hour holding myself there, this voice came to me. I don't know if it's God or the universe or Providence. I can't explain it. It said, "Josh, go back inside and ask for help." And I was like, "No, I can't." And I started fighting with that. All the negativity that I kind of mentioned and maybe some more. Right? I didn't know how to shut that off. I didn't have those coping skills yet. And I was almost 27 years old. I didn't have those coping skills yet. And so beyond that, another half hour passes, and the voice comes back and says, Josh, I don't think you want to die. I just don't think you want to feel like this anymore. Go back inside and ask for help. So I fought a little bit more, then I pulled myself back inside, sat on the floor, cried for a long time, and then almost immediately though, I started repeating this mantra, this prayer, this guttural cry to the heavens. Please help me connect with positive people, positive thoughts, positive experiences, and I repeated that for about 2 hours until I found the clarity of space as to who, how, what, when, where I'd get some help. Um, and I ended up calling the last person in the world that I wanted to speak to was my mom. And it was weird, it was awkward. I hadn't spoken to her about 6 months, and then in that moment, in the beginning, she actually was very judgmental. She threw her brand new religion at me, which still doesn't make sense to me, but in that moment, it definitely didn't make sense to me. And and then I threatened to hang up on her, which I was gonna. I wasn't ready for that. And I still not ready for that, to be honest. But she flipped the script. She became my mom again. And she did a lot of what some of y'all maybe have seen in your QPR sessions, which is incredible and amazing. And so what happened after that was, and I'll talk about that conversation in a bit, but it was really this idea that, I started getting into therapy and looking into crisis lines and looking into volunteering, and I was developing coping skills and learning about neuroscience and all these different things. And I found out something amazing throughout this, and before I get to there, my slide game is weak. I'm going to tell you that right now. My PowerPoint game is weak. So I forgot this. I forget. I get so excited. I forget to put these up. So that was me as a kid. I was going like, "Oh, he's so cute. We're gonna feel more for him because we see him as like a 6-year-old." But so I still have that T-shirt. I'm gonna wear it for Halloween. No, little. They won't let me out of the house with that. So anyway, but that essentially, and I think you all know this. But so we're gonna get into some more nuances of just beyond this. But it's that suicide's preventable. You and I and all of us can get help and be helpers, and that goes beyond your social work hat. You don't have to just be a clinician. I think you know that. But you're human beings before you wear that hat, So we're talking client suicide prevention, but a lot of these pieces apply to, your everyday lives. So that was incredible to me learning this because it gave me a lot of hope and a lot of joy because I thought it was inevitable, not preventable. I was like, grandfather, father, okay. I'm next. It's not if but when. It's not the case. I'm not a slave to my heritage or my brain. Put in safety nets and choices, and that's what I do. So this is kind of where we start talking to one another. And I just want to hear different points of view and perspectives. So I'm curious, in your experience, in each of your individual experiences, maybe a collective experience, what do you think puts people in that space, in that headspace, to start thinking about suicide? Are they angry, sad, bored? Do they need a Snickers? What do you think? Throw it down. What do you got? Feeling isolated. Yeah.
Don't have options.
Feel like you don't have options. There's a hopelessness to it. Like it can't get better. How's it ever going to get better? Or I'm less than, or I'm being made to feel worthless, or I'm LGBT, or in some places of the world, in this country even, like you're a person of color, you don't belong. It's terrible, but I don't know how I deal with that. I've lived different kind of privilege. So, yeah. So those are definitely two big ones. Anybody else? Yes.
I think the person feels defeated. And when I see these videos sometimes of work that we're looking for illness, I know personally because I've been there before. It feels like you're trapped inside your own mind, and there's no escaping it, and you feel like literally there's no other choice. Like even if you were to get help, there was no other option to get back. You kind of feel like a slave to your religion.
Yeah, there's this element of this is it. This is all I got, and it's almost seen as a coping skill, right? I see this in young people at times. A lot of the work I do in school districts, like that behavioral change from that kid who's sullen and downtrodden all the time, and then they flip it and they come in and they're super excited and jovial, and it's because now they're relieved because they have a plan. It's that coping skill. That's obviously not a healthy one. It's not one we want to see anyone go through, but it's that sort of element that you're speaking to. That it can become sort of a coping skill, and a lot of this can be layered too. could be what you said. And you said it could be all of it at the same time. That's a feat. That's definitely there. One or two others? Somebody? Yes. Yeah, it could be a piece of revenge. It could be a piece of revenge. I think there was an element of that with my father, to my mother. So, that's somebody who's not in his right mind. That was very disappointing, and I was angry about it for a while. And I was kind of, well, what's he going through? He feels the need to do that. It's cognitive dissonance of, because I'm so close to that, right? How do you reconcile that? Did you ever do it? Yeah. Yeah, I thank you for mentioning that the cultural can be a cultural piece, and I don't just mean ethnicity or religion. There's lots of different kinds of ways, like a school culture, or this culture, or that culture. Um, I know in not my it's not my experience, but I have friends who work in this field, and one woman is self-identifying as African American, and she said, "I grew up thinking it was a white person's problem." We don't talk about that. We got other things going on. It's okay. That's my experience, but it's interesting to hear that. I know I'm not Catholic, but I know in certain Catholic combined with Hispanic, sometimes what happens on stays on. Or in some cultures, like, this is the God problem. This isn't, so this is about your spirituality. So that's why it's really important for me to get into church communities too, even though I'm not. It's still an important piece of people's lives. So thank you for bringing that up. And thanks to everyone so far. I haven't taken any individually, but it's important to say that. It really comes back to this hopelessness piece. The feelings of sadness and that you're burdened, they're just so overwhelming. The heaviness of your pain, is so big that your ability to cope, it just dwarfs that. I thought there was only one way to do this. When things get bad, what else you do? You check out. I didn't know about, therapy. I didn't know about, you know, this little guinea pig I have at home. I pull out, and she makes me happy if I'm having a bad day. Like her name's Harriet. Callus all over her body. It's ridiculous. I gotta get a picture of her on these slides. All the different things, right? Coping skills. Yes, sir.
What about coping with pain?
Chronic pain. Yeah, chronic pain can be a big one.
Did your father have chronic pain?
He did not. He was a chronic pain. Chronic pain. That's that. I'm glad you brought that up too. That's not something that we talk about a lot, but I know I have friends. Just because I just get around, and I know people with chronic pain, and I know people with chronic conditions that lead to pain, and they often have intense feelings of suicide because these are co-occurring things. It could be a friend of mine, for instance, one of her deals, like she took this bad antibiotic, and so that antibiotic led her to have 11 tendon ruptures in like 10 years or something like that, and they're still happening. And so she can't quite be the same person she was. So there's all that going on there, right? So I'm not who I was. I got all this pain going on. I gained weight. All this different stuff. These different layers, like that go with chronic pain, and that go with I have an ostomy bag now, so I got to walk around with this then. So I think what kind of I'm tuned into is like everybody kind of has a different experience, a different piece of trauma, and what's traumatic to you isn't traumatic to me. But we need to honor those experiences no matter what. And realize that, whatever it is, still gotta help, whatever that is, What do you think puts people at risk? What do you think puts people at risk for suicide? Is it, I don't know. Is it, like I said, white people, black people, sleeping in the back of the room? Yeah. Yes.
Well, I read like a statistic that it's more likely to happen, or more likely to happen for people who are over the age of 16, and something to do with like men being more likely to attempt or succeed in
Complete.
complete
Yeah.
complete suicide. So, and I think a part of it too. When you're at risk, the impulsiveness too.
Yeah.
You've got a plan, legality.
Yep. I want to distill a couple things if you don't mind, and then I see hands too, so I want to make sure I get to that. But I just, if I may comment on that, I know we're having a discussion, but I'm also in the front of the room, so I have to do that. Thank you for allowing me that. 60 years and older white men actually tends to be a big demographic. Think about a lot of major change, right? So you lost your spouse, you're getting up to that age where death by natural occurrences happens a little more frequently than when you're 25. So a lot of major change. You might have retired. So where's your sense of purpose? You might lose a sense of purpose. You might start losing close friends and allies. And then of course we're talking about 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds right now. This might change in 20 years, but this is typically a demographic who isn't accustomed to speaking and being open about their feelings. You hold that in. And yes, men are more likely to attempt. Actually, no, men are more likely to complete than women. Women attempt more than men, and that goes across the board. We also see that attempts are higher, and there's a specific kind of lethality in men in states that have looser gun laws. I'm not going to get into that. We're in Texas. You have open carry here. I have open carry in my state, in California. It's called marijuana. Again, how many of those can we have today? So, yeah, thank you for that. And one other thing I want to say, and I thank you for being cool about it. You said succeeded, I said completed, right? And so that's one thing I want to bring to the table. Like, there's going to be some dialogue in how we speak about this. It's going to be really important when we talk to our clients, maybe when we educate in the community. You don't succeed in this suicide, you complete. You don't commit suicide, you die by suicide. And then, this doesn't fall into this room, but I don't eat suicide buffaloes. I do, but talk to the chef or suicide wind sprints, in gym class, it's nonsense. Running a wind sprint is nowhere near being an emotional thing, having suicidal thoughts. So, that being said, thank you. Risk factors. Yes, back to you. Thank you.
Typically, if like you have people in your family who committed suicide, and your risk factor goes up like really much.
Big time. Absolutely, because it's now somewhat of a learned behavior. Family history is a big risk factor. I believe the statistic is 4 times more likely to make an attempt on your life. I certainly fall into that demographic. Why it's so important to talk family history. We talk about diabetes in family history. Well, we can't tell him he's 6. We can talk about diabetes with a 6-year-old. We can do that. We can talk about it with kid gloves. Depression does not always lead to suicide. It can lead to suicide. And thank you for bringing that up as well, because that's another teaching move. That's another point of discussion. And if anyone disagrees, I have something to say further. That's what this is all about. Thank you again. So yeah, depression can lead to suicide. I think that's when it's untreated or mistreated, of course. And then I think situationally, of course, you have a lot of major change that can lead to loosely called a situational depression. And when we don't have coping skills to deal with that, can lead to suicidal thinking. So family history is a big risk factor, and genetics do play a role in mental illness as well. And when it goes untreated, we don't talk about it. When we talk about family history, it's a big issue. Yes, sir.
Alcohol and drug abuse.
Absolutely, alcohol and drug abuse are risk factors. I think we see a lot when folks are going through a suicidal period or they're leading up to it. We see that kind of ramp up a bit. It's a cheap antidepressant, as it were, metaphorically speaking. It's a way to mask problems, not to deal with things. I've had those issues in my past, so I can speak to that experience as well. Dangerous. It can be dangerous for sure. Thank you. Yes?
They're all like 5 seconds. So it's a biological component,
Yeah.
it's a psychological process. And the social
Lack of social supports. Yeah. Lack of social support. Social support is an insulator against that. I don't care if it's church, work, school, might be that mentor. That's why I like to say supports with an S. And I do staff trainings and stuff. I say we need different. I
Oh,
see.
well.
I'm just gonna finish
Finish
that thought.
the
And then
thought.
I just want to make sure I saw you and you weren't fixing your hair. But social supports, like I know we're gonna be therapists, some of us, or in that role in some one way, shape, or form. And so it's really important that we're not the only one that person leans on. But if you're out sick one day, we really need to encourage a multi-tiered support system. So thanks for looking through that thought.
Well, I'm spinning off of what you were saying, social support, but I'm thinking more in the context of toxic environments that are meant to be helpful. I'm speaking from personal experience with religion, and
Sure.
it's supposed to be a place where you can be open, but instead there's a certain list of guidelines to follow, and you've got to fall in a certain niche. And I can see how a risk factor could be a toxic environment that, whether it is overt or subliminal, it still causes confusion.
To that point, I think my father's situation, we went to church so much. I think in certain ways that had its positives. I think in some ways there's some negatives to that environment. And one of the negatives was that they basically shunned him when he started kind of dipping his toes in the water of, I need to get some help. And they were like, well, you're a sinner, you need to apologize to your wife and to God and all that stuff. And that's not really what we need to hear. There are different things that we can glean from the Abrahamic books. I think that's probably what most people ascribe to in this area, in many areas in the U.S. There's many things that we can pull out of those books before we talk about sinner and going to hell, and even partisan religions and stuff like that too. There's stuff in there, so we can as social supports within that context. I have such a big heart for that because I can see how good they can be and I can see how detrimental they can be. And that goes for schools. It's supposed to be a positive place. It should be like Disneyland and a social equalizer. And sometimes the teacher sees this kid who's having behavioral problems and they think, well, that kid's disrespectful and rude and wrong. That kid might be having something going on at home and the only note they know how to show is anger. Let's read between the lines. So these environments that are supposed to be positive, but are, end up being sort of negative or unhelpful. Yeah, that can be very risky. I say it's everybody. We're the sum total of the 5 people that we spend time with. So we're the company that we keep. Who are you spending? 5 people you're spending time. That really kind of goes for me. It's a really big thing with kids, But I know adults that need to change their script with who they hang out with, So just riffing on that. Any other risk factors you can think of? Yes, and then I'll get back to you as well. Yes. Big time. Big time. Thank you for that. Yes, trauma is huge. Sexual trauma, abuse, emotional neglect, even physical abuse. Somebody trying to take that power away from anybody, really. Even war, something traumatic. And I think I mentioned this before, it was traumatic to you is traumatic to me and vice versa. So I think it's important when we are serving our clients that we really uncover that. And yes, sir. PTSD, post-traumatic stress, can be huge. And I know veterans with that. I know rape survivors that have post-traumatic stress. People who are families, the victims of homicide, can have post-traumatic. And there's a lot of different ways that can happen. And when we don't have treatment and context, it's very, very difficult. It can be very, very difficult to deal with those thoughts. And to deal with that every single day in the body. Yes. Go for it. Yeah. Yeah.
But you said your dad committed suicide because of the divorce, and then your dad committed suicide
Yeah.
because of the divorce. So why is your mom?
Why am I on what?
Why is your mom not? I guess go to the divorce with her living from the kid. Did she feel that you were seeing you and your dad seeing more?
That's a good question. I don't quite know. It's not. let me ask you this, because I don't quite get the relevance to the conversation, and that's on me. So I'd like to know why you're asking that question, and I can maybe better answer it. You know, just curious. Um, I think for her, that's her way of coping, of understanding the world. That's the only lens she's ever seen through, and so I think that's the only note. And I still think that, and we do connect on different levels, not because now I'm a parent, now I'm a husband, a stepfather, father. So we kind of, because she understands that, but she doesn't quite. So with the religious piece, I think that's her solution for everything. Well, if, you can't fix it, God's the hammer, the screwdriver, and the saw, and everything. The duct tape, everything, yeah, exactly. Some tussin, let's put some tussin on Windex. So, honestly, I don't know. I think this might be an offline conversation, to be honest, because I don't know that it has a broader context. But I'd love to have that conversation with you because I don't get it either, to be honest. So I'm going to move on from that. I see you, and I think I see a few others. Yes. Major change, yes. A lot of changes, a lot of change. I wonder what that's going to look like in the context of when you all work with your clients and stuff, the people that you meet, the people that you know. And I'm going back to the kids because I've been seeing a lot of kids lately. And it could be dad died 4 years ago, grandma up and moved 2 years ago, best friend just moved a couple weeks ago, and that's layer upon layer upon layer. And well, I don't have the information from 4 years ago. Let's find the kid. Let's find out why this kid is doing what he or she is doing. A lot of major change. That's tough. I don't deal with change too well. Not a lot of it all at once. Give me some time. Yeah. Go for it. Yeah. I like that. There's this element of it's an uncomfortable conversation. You got to do it one way. Get over it. Yeah. I want to put a push pin in this because I know where this is going to go in my head, and so it's going to go into another section, and we're going to get a chance to talk about it. So hold on to it for a few moments because I think I got this. Sir.
Sense of failure, whether that's real or something else, like you didn't get a job or you got a bad grade or someone left you. So you just think you failed at something or you're failing someone or something like that.
Yeah, I see that type A folks, like my blinders are on this for the entire time. Like I'm gonna get valedictorian in high school, and then I'm gonna get into Yale pre-med, and then I'm gonna go to Harvard med. I'm gonna become a psychiatrist, but then I'm gonna get my own show next to Dr. Phil, and then they get a B plus on one of their finals in undergrad, and and it all falls apart. And we chuckle about it a little bit. That is real, and so I see that and that perceived sense of failure. I'm failing mom and dad. I'm a first generation student. I'm supposed to be doing something different. I'm not supposed to be working with my hands. Um, uh, expectations are tough, right? A friend who says expectations are the seeds of disappointment. Kind of interesting. But great answer. Yeah, that perceived sense of failure. Not that it's a lesson learned on the way to success, that it's the end of the world. I've been there. I've done that. It's a rough way to live. I saw a few other hands. I just want to make sure I see them. And yes. In the
one body.
ah.
So, traditional culture, that would be the grandpa.
Yeah. So your cousin's transgender? Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. That can, just the gender identity piece, I think is really, really big. One of my kids happens to be friends with a lot of transgender kids for a variety of reasons. And it's interesting to see that perspective. And I'm in a class, and there's a young man, a gentleman who's female to male, and just his experience as well, coming from a Mexican family, and he's come a long way, and his family's come a long way, but intense feelings of suicide. I'm not who I'm supposed to be, and nobody gets it. And there's a lot of trans people, youth, who are homeless because they've been shunned. Family doesn't get it. It can be a hard thing to accept, but ultimately that's that person. That's who they want to be. That's who they are. I saw it. I think. Down here. Yes. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Not having appropriate coping skills is the power.
Yeah, not having appropriate coping skills, outlets, definitely risky, right? I didn't have any that 6, 7 years ago. I was like one note. I had a hammer for everything, and then I had an exit card. You know, um, so we need, yeah, encouraging the development of coping skills, especially as future helpers and seeing clients. I saw. Thank you. Yeah, just piling one thing after another after another after another. I think there can be a lack of boundaries, right, about how you set your workload or whatever, or what you decide to do. I mean, I take on 6, 7 things at once. It all becomes the work, and then I'm like, well, what happened? Like, dude, chill out. Do 2 things, 3 things. Yeah. Thank you.
See, how do we help?
I'm getting there.
I'm going crazy.
All right, me too. Me too. You got people are chatting.
I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of people that need to be helped. So like,
Yes,
how do
indeed.
we do that?
All right. Yes.
I just want to encourage you guys to hang on to the very important thing we discussed about taking on too much. I've been teaching social work students for 12 years now, and y'all are all guilty of that. So learn to take care of yourselves and set limits for yourselves and know how to do self-awareness, because it's hard for us to help our clients when we're not taking care of us as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's a great point. We're carers, we're empaths, I think, and we want to help everybody, and we all have 3 versions of the same cake. One's in the dry cleaners. I got people cake alone. Let it go for a minute. Take a rest. Go get a massage, yo. So I feel you on this. Like, let's get to it. I think the discussion is important. I'm very impatient too. Sometimes for the better, a lot of times for the worse. Yes, yeah.
I know we want to get to it, but I have one more risk factor that
Yeah, please.
undiagnosed other mental illness issues.
Yeah.
Even as something as common as like obsessive compulsive disorder. I know in high school I struggled with thoughts of suicide, and for me, it turns out I have a highly analytical brain, and if there's not another voice in there to distract me from like the things that I would get locked in to focus on, which ended up being, I'm not officially obsessive compulsive, but those tendencies are present. And there's other mental illnesses like bipolar disorder or other things that I even know children with ADHD can often become depressed. Again, it's like this.
Yeah.
There's not an off switch in their brain
Right.
for their thoughts, and they can often, if they're not being handled, they can drive you to the edge of the cliff just because you don't know where to go with it.
Right. Mistreated, untreated, undiagnosed even mental illness, and sometimes the comorbidity or the co-occurring. Sometimes some of that gets overlapped, and we miss things at times. I know that there's been people in my life who I'm close to who have been misdiagnosed, and they thought it was bipolar for a long time, and it turns out it was schizoaffective. They have elements of schizophrenia and the bipolar piece. And so that's a whole different, not a whole different, but a lot of different treatment in terms of talk therapy, maybe CBT, dialectical behavior therapy even, or just different meds regime too. So it's really, really important to kind of work with that, and then work with their psychiatrist, work with their general practitioner. Yeah, definitely. That untreated, misdiagnosed, undiagnosed, or even misreading the signs of the co-occurring. Yes. The wrong kind of psychiatric meds. They move together. Even non-psychiatric meds. You mix the wrong this and that, a benzo with you drinking too much with a benzo. I mean, like there's, yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing we probably didn't mention was maybe incarceration, and I would even say we need to even look at families of, because that's a traumatic experience. I've been working with families of people who are incarcerated, and also people incarcerated because of a homicide that's occurred in my family. So I have a real part for that situation, regardless of guilt, not guilty, whatever. Restorative justice is a really big deal. And a lot of these we said. So what get to it, I promise. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
No, I'm Naomi.
Holler at me.
I popped in late, so.
Oh,
But.
You're good.
Late.
Yeah.
When you brought up the preparation, that brings up something that I just spoke with, I did kind of support health.
Okay, sure.
And yesterday, I don't know if you spoke about something that comes up in preparation and health. In many states, if not most, are the biggest providers of health.
Indeed.
And as I've been doing these visits where we're going to people with IBD, I've noticed because a lot of the diagnoses, things that I would think are house burgers or there's an schizophrenia and things like that. And I'm getting one with these people and noticing things suicide on the chart. And I think about incorporation as a huge passion of mine. I think about them. And so I think about the people like I just think about food forever.
Yep.
And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what is there? I know we're going to get to the healthy food, but like, what is your? How do we help people? What is our role in social work?
I think this is just my experience and my opinion. Because not all of us are going to want to or be working with those populations. But for those who want to, I think for me, one of the biggest things to remind myself of is that they're victims of major trauma themselves. And so, what should I disclose? No, I won't. No, I just, there's somebody close in my life who has been, we just recently found out she's been a victim of sexual trauma. And her perpetrator, we also found out, is a young person, as is she. She's younger than that person, and he is a victim of sexual trauma himself. And so there's this one side I want to break his legs, and the other side I'm like, well, you need help and treatment. And I'm like, so can we do both? No.
Just me. Okay.
No, I'm not serious. We'll cut that out. That's all I need. So I think that difficult piece can be empathy, and then I think the empathy landing there. I think landing there will then inform how we move forward and how we help somebody. And I think honestly, it's one of the biggest ultimate tests of being a social worker, being a helper, being someone who's listening, providing therapeutic solutions. Because you're not always going to agree with that person if it's an easier population, right? And so, what are your triggers? What is it that you can't deal with? What is it that you won't see? Or what is it that you can use to stretch yourself with, you know? And that's the ultimate test, I think. Because they've done some really heinous and horrendous things in many cases, especially there's maximum security, there's murder, rape, molestation involved. Some of that would be hard for me. So I think landing on empathy first, and then I think just every life has intrinsic value. I think even those lives, bless you. I don't know completely about the rehabilitation piece because unfortunately our system isn't really set up that way.
I mean, and the thing that really shocked me is I found out until I watched that documentary.
Yeah.
He was innocent. He was in hospital
Mm-hmm.
for 3 years. And he was put into solitary confinement for majority of that time. You know that solitary confinement. You go in without
Yeah.
disorder and you come out with.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to make sure I'm on time because I'm looking at that clock and it's dead. So I was like, oh, we got lots of time. It's been the longest 20 minutes of my life. So make sure I'm respecting people's time. So I want to move forward because there's a really important piece that we're going to move to. I think at this point I'm going to breeze through signs and symptoms because what's going to happen is going to be the piece that I think the real crux of it, the real juicy piece is going to be this improv section scenario. So you can kind of see what it looks like in a certain sense. So let's take a few minutes on signs and symptoms. I don't want to rush anybody because this is also an important piece. But what does it look like? What do people look like when they're thinking of it? Sad, happy, crazy, scared, hungry? Yes.
I think their behavior and everything is kind of up and down. Like when it was seeing all happy and next minute it was sad. It's kind of like I think that's this stage of trying to figure out like what to do for that.
Yeah.
Not important, you know,
Yeah. Like, what's my purpose? Why am I here? I always tell people the quickest way, and I believe this with my whole heart, and it's some of what we've done with our paper, the first one, like making meetings, so helping people in whatever way you can. It's a way to kind of keep your feet on the ground. That was one big one for me, and we found in some of that work that we've done uh, that's really an insulating factor, and it's a great way to find sense of purpose. Do what you can, where you can, how you can. All you can do is open the door, do it. You can throw the cape on tomorrow, do it. You know. So yeah, I see you and I see you. So I'm gonna go here and here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it can look like nothing. Like the person can seem completely normal, functioning completely normal in society and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's hard to like see or tell or diagnose.
Yeah. You toss up a
Sometimes.
lot. I was going to correct you, but no, I don't need to. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to see. You know, I think the statistic goes something like 95% of suicides are preventable, and then there's this gray area with the other 5%. And I don't, you know, let's aim for 100, right? But yeah, sometimes it's hard to see. You know, it could be that impulsivity. Young people, the brains aren't done developing until around 27. That's the frontal lobe, frontal cortex, which controls impulses. You know, so that's something that's very it's very dangerous. You know, it's just that's why I work with a lot of kids. You know, so it might not look like something. I think a lot of times though, and this is just my experience, because when I look back at my father and his experience and what he went through, I think we didn't see it coming, but looking back, there was like 5 or 6 red flags, you know, and I find that a lot. Like we didn't see it coming. We find out the signs and symptoms, like, oh, okay, yeah. So it's just like reading between the lines, and this is kind of outside of the maybe a little bit outside of the social work piece, or being compliance, but like we're socialized in society to kind of like, hey, how's it going? Fine, thanks, you know, and it's really a little bit hard, like reading between the lines. You know, I think that's going to be really, really big in our work, in your work as you move forward. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some identifiable signs as far as like how the individual like takes care of themselves. You know, if they're shaving their beard, if they got a haircut, if their clothes are clean, just the way they hold themselves, you know, they can take care of themselves. But I also saw yesterday in CNN the video of the Linkin Park lead singer.
Chester.
Yeah. So it was like 36 hours before his suicide. I don't know, it's still covering or something, like did like a rotten egg jelly bean. He was just having fun down the table for 36 hours before he came to
Rod jelly beans are not.
something came up.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and that's the danger too with public personas and stuff. And I had somebody bring up Robin Williams the other day, and he seemed so happy. And this, I was like, that's what he should. He's a cartoon character. You never met him, you know, so we don't know him. So that's a danger. Although I don't need to go on a tangent, but yes, and it does have to do with hygiene and different things like that. That's a big one, right? Like I had a very spotty, ugly looking beard. I smelled like an old taco. Like I just wasn't taking care of myself. It was bad, you know. And so looking back, I mean, that would have been something to look for if I had people around me that kind of used to look for. I see you in the back, and I see you. Thank you, sir.
Kind of bouncing off the same thing you said, like, you'll change your behaviors kind of for someone to notice, I feel like if you normally are a very clean cut person, suddenly, like, you're dressed in a hoodie and sweats all the time, then, like, you're hoping someone's going to notice and ask, like, hey, what's wrong? Or, like, people you normally wouldn't reach out to, you're reaching out to them, and that's kind of something to look for, like, oh, like, they're reaching out to me, like, what's going on there?
Definitely.
You're wearing a hoodie. Should you be worried?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Social work, got it. Yeah, behavior change, start clothes, or vice versa. I think something to pay attention to. Sometimes it's again reading between the lines, like that cry for help is so verbal. I might be better off not being here anymore on Instagram. The world might be better off without me. Just reading between the lines. Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. Dylan, awesome. I saw a couple people over here. I'm gonna get there, and then we'll go here, and then maybe we'll. Yes, and yes, yes.
Well, I was thinking, like, so it is sometimes hard to emphasize someone you're very close to, but if it's your friends, family, individuals, you kind of know friends and that struggle with the same thoughts, they would the same thing. Right? So that's how I know. That's my thing. Like, where's she been? I haven't heard from her. Hey, what's going on? Like, I know that because I didn't know anything now. That my best friend knows what I've struggled with. So she's like, if I'm missing, that's a warning sign for her, and so she'll come and check on me. So I just think that we have to be, in tune with our friends and family and loved ones to know, like, is this an open behavior? Where have they been and why is it not?
Yeah, because we're not just social workers, right? We wear different hats and different things. Holistic human being. Isolation is a big one. I think that's very, very common. I have that experience as well. My dad had that experience. I see that a lot. That's why it's really important. It's not always about the relationship. Like, they don't care about me. No, it's like, maybe having a difficult time and having a hard time reaching out to them. Thank you for that. Yes. Oh, yeah. And I see that in a lot of demographics in age groups. I see a lot of young people giving away things, or I hear about it rather, giving away that Xbox, or basketball cards, or whatever is important to them. So it's definitely something to look for. Yes.
I just was going to add to that, giving away stuff and also risky behavior.
Risky behavior.
Taking healthcare, do whatever.
Yeah. I had a friend who has a mental illness. She's got schizoaffective disorder. She's been suicidal before she was able to manage her treatment. And she was like, I ran up a tree in a gold sequin dress. I thought it was a good idea. Risky behaviors, And she wasn't sure if it was going to end up being suicide attempt, but it was still risky behaviors without thinking. Yes, thank you.
I think some people who fall out of this behavior, people that makes it to social behavior like they're already.
Yeah.
And if it just so happens to end in that, so that's kind of where they end up.
Yeah. Could be a slow march, I'm taking that drink, taking that drink, taking that drink. It's a slow march to, because I don't want to feel this way. Yes, thank you. Oh boy.
And she isolates herself from her family. So she started taking her medicine, ran out for her boyfriend, now she's on dialysis, so she is on high risky behavior. She's trying to commit suicide, but she is,
A lot going on.
yes, a lot going on with her.
Hey, that's gotta be a lot for you too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Glad you're here. Yeah, that's definitely some risk behavior that goes with. Again, that kind of goes to sometimes physical and mental are co-occurring, right? And a lot of people, I'm not painting broad strokes, a lot of people with diabetes and depression or anxiety. Thank you for sharing. Yes.
In my experience, my friends also been and stuff. It's kind of like a slow tackle where it kind of like sinks into you and you retreat more and more.
Yeah.
And at least for my best friend, she has problems with it because everything that she used to, or that she can see everyone else doing so easily, like getting up and going to class, just doing the normal things, it's so difficult. Like, she has to talk to herself mentally for 2 hours before she even gets up out of bed to try to convince herself to walk out the door, And then she starts looking around the world and seeing all these other people who do it so effortlessly, and then she's like, why can't I be like them? I must be messed up. And what if I can never be like them? What if I can never lead a normal life because this is controlling me?
Yeah. That's so rough, and I know that's so true. And I've got people in my life who are having that experience right now. It's hard to watch and hard to be that carer, but it's a real thing. I just want to take a quick tangent, and I think we're going to move forward. I wish that we were socialized a little differently, and not seeing. I know mental illness is difficult. It's difficult for me. If I could not have it, I probably would not have it. But it's also provided a lot of, it sounds strange, benefits and opportunities, and a different way of looking at the world, and more empathy, and I'm not as much of a jackass as I used to be. I'm proclivity to roll that way sometimes, and so I wish we would sort of teach people that there's opportunity, and it doesn't make everything better. I don't want to play that card either, but if we can figure out somehow to show folks that there's not all liabilities are liabilities, they can also be seen as assets. So thank you for sharing that. How do we need to go much further into warning signs. I think some of this we've already seen. Looking for ways, talking or writing. In their poetry, there's a suicide, or in their novel, there's a person who dies by suicide. I wanna. This is where you're gonna help, and so this is gonna be. I want to tell you, and I want to show you. So this is gonna be how you would help someone thinking of suicide, and really, client or no client, the best thing you can do. What my mom did for me after she changed her script, as it were, was she listened to me, listen some more, and that's huge, client or not. When was the last time somebody listened to you for more than 30 seconds without jumping in? Somebody in crisis probably feels like they haven't been heard in a while. That somebody probably even maybe interjected like "feel better tomorrow" or "it's in God's hands," and that's more like absolving yourself from like a typical conversation, like, "Oh, God will take care of it," or "Tomorrow will take care of it, so I'm going to go this way, peace." You're not, that's more or less what you're doing and saying. And I don't think that we would be those kinds of helpers, but it's worth saying. Because if you catch somebody doing it, you can twist their metaphorical art a little bit. So listening is huge. Not trying to provide solutions. I mean, I think you're probably getting that experience in your coursework and folks who maybe if you're getting your hours, but all of our brains work differently, right? It could be 100 different solutions to an architecture, creating an arch, and my brain doesn't solve the way you would, and all the way around doesn't mean the solution is any less valid. But you're coming to me and I'm in crisis, and you're supposed to be helping me and listening to me, helping me reframe, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, how can we fix you? And now the window of opportunity goes like this because I'm thinking you don't care about me, you don't know me, and all that stuff, and you lose trust. So you really just instead listening for clues as to what might keep them grounded, something they might feel responsible for. They're the only person in the world who can grandma had insulin without it hurting. I'm the only one who takes care of the school garden. I mean, whatever it is, there's a lot of insulating factors I think that we can kind of bring to light. Empathy as well. Just be really explicit how important their life is to you. One thing I think, and this might get covered in the improv, just don't tell people it's going to get better. It's going to get different. What? Ever? No. It sort of marginalizes what they're going through. I cringe a little bit when I hear people say that, and it comes, I think, from a good place. Like, how's it going to get better? How do you know? It's just very off-putting, and I just really think like it gets different. You might feel differently. I mean, and you might even say my experience is like I believe it's going to get better for you, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you it gets different because you have a different experience. A lot of I statements. And I put this as to refer to professional help, and maybe you might have to. Maybe beyond your professional scope, you might need to pull somebody else in, a psychiatrist, a general practitioner. Maybe that person doesn't feel comfortable seeing a white therapist. Maybe that person would feel more comfortable seeing a gay counselor or a self-describing transgender counselor, what have you. Great little anecdote to that is I have somebody in this counseling class I'm taking for just personal development. He's self-describing as African American, and when he was 13, he's like 40 or 50 or something, and he lost his mom. She just died. And he was 13, he's from Compton, so we don't talk in Compton. I live in LA. So his dad put him into a psychiatrist sort of program. It was this older Jewish guy, and the guy really kind of saw this gentleman who I'm speaking of, and he was like, "Would you feel more comfortable talking to a black therapist?" I said, "Yeah." And so the foresight of that gentleman for my friend is incredible. That he asked that question and was cool with that. I think it's powerful. It's not about you; it's about them. It's nothing to do with it. So let me show you what that looks like.
Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Pretorius, you probably know me, I'm on the faculty, and this is
Josh Rivedal, and I'm not on the faculty, but I'm here as a guest speaker today, and we're recording, and what are we doing here?
Well, I wanted for Josh and I to role play for you what you might do if you're working with a client who is suicidal. And so, here we've offered you guys QPR before, but that's really for any lay person. This is really more for what you might do in a session where you're kind of expected to be the expert who knows what to do. So it's a little bit beyond QPR. So we're gonna start off. Kind of the scenario is that I'm the therapist, and I hope you guys have already learned that we would never actually have a table here because that closes us off, right? But my office is small, so we're gonna work with it. Just pretend the table is not here. But the scenario is that Josh and I have been working together for a few sessions now. So Josh is my client. We're gonna get started. So good. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Regina. I don't know if there's like an easy way to say this. I just don't think I want to be in therapy anymore. It's not getting better.
Josh, I'm really surprised to hear you say that. I mean, I thought we were starting to get comfortable with each other and really just starting to do our work. Is there something new?
Yeah. I think, I don't know if it's a definite, but I'm just having problems with my wife, and I think she might be thinking about leaving me. I don't know. There's this like coworker, and I haven't really confronted her about it, and it's driving me crazy. And I think like I just go over it and over it and over and over it, and it's driving me crazy, and I can't make it stop. And like I've been through so much, and like I don't need this. And like, when is it gonna stop? Like, when is it gonna get some peace? And I just don't want to do it. I don't want to do therapy. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be. It's like, why? What's the point? Why even? Like, like I thought I was rebounding. Like, and then if the person is supposed to be closest to me doesn't want me, doesn't want like what everybody else feels like that too. I feel like that.
Josh, I'm really, really worried right now. I know you've been through so much. I've heard you tell me so many things that I can't begin to imagine what it's like to be you, and I know this is just one more thing. I'm really worried that you're thinking about hurting yourself right now, or taking your life. Are you thinking about suicide?
Like, yeah, a lot.
It's a lot.
A couple times a day. And when it comes, like, it's like it doesn't go away for a while.
Thank you for trusting me to tell me that. Thank you. I want you to know I care about you. Okay? And I know there are people in your life that care about you. So, Josh, the fact that you came here today to talk to me, even though I know you were trying, to end this relationship and, in essence, kind of fire me, I want you to hear that the fact that you're here tells me you're not ready. You're not completely sold on dying. Okay? And I wouldn't want you to make that decision and want to take it back after you can't. In the time we've been together, we've been seeing each other for about 4 sessions now?
Yeah.
I know you've shared with me some incredible love for your daughter, for your children, and for your life. And I wouldn't want you to walk away from that without knowing what might change tomorrow.
I do love them. I don't
And I
know.
know they love you.
I hope so.
They do. They came into that family session last week.
Yeah.
I could see it in their eyes. I could. I know it's hard for you to see it. I know. don't know if you know this, but I've struggled with depression too. And I know when you're in it, it's so hard to see anything but that hurt.
Yeah, that's what it's like. It's like I'm in this pit, and I'm trying to get out of it. Like I just slide back down. I'm tired.
Yeah.
Tired.
Well, what if we do this? What if right now we sit down and make a list of the things that are not working and pick one to focus on, one that we can try to change between now and the next time we see each other. What do you think?
When? I don't know how much longer I can last. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess.
Well, let's pick one thing. The first thing that came out of your mouth just now was that you're so tired. How are you sleeping?
I'm not. I can't. It's like my mind's racing.
You can't turn it down.
I can't turn it down, and I'm trying like anything. Like I'm taking these like melatonin things, and I'm trying like pot, I'm trying drinking, I'm trying everything, and nothing's working, and I can't stay up any longer. Or I'm gonna lose my mind.
So it's been a long time since you've slept.
It feels like weeks.
Well, then let's focus on that as the first thing. So let's talk about how we can get you to sleep.
Okay.
When's your next appointment with your doctor? Can you make one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't we do
Can
that
you
right
help
now?
me with that?
Yeah,
I just
can.
don't know if I can do it by
No,
myself
it's okay.
right now.
we can call.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna call your doctor, right?
Yeah.
And try to come up with a plan about your sleeping.
Okay.
So there's lots of things that interfere with sleep, like being on your phone, in your bed. Is there a TV in your room?
Yeah.
So see, there are a lot of things we can try to work on just between now. Today is Thursday. I'm gonna see you Monday. Okay. So I want right now for us to devise a plan to see if we can get some sleep before Monday. When you hear me say we, do you know why I'm saying we? I'm saying we because I'm here with you. Okay, we're doing this together. Okay, you can check in with me. You have the hotline number for after hours. Okay?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
partners. Okay. I'm gonna see you on Monday. Alive in that chair. Okay. So you're just gonna take one thing at a time. Just one thing.
Okay.
Let's go call you.
Alright.
Role play's over.
Mm-hmm.
What worked for you? Or what didn't?
I think there was persistence that was good. This kind and gentle persistence was really helpful. I think it was just enough to hear the we and together. Like it didn't do a ton for me, but it was just enough to be like, okay, all right, I got an ally, I got somebody here. Yeah, I think those are the two biggest things. I'm not sure about what didn't work. I mean, I think it's all frame of reference anyway.
Absolutely.
I think that would be kind of tough to make that call.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those two things were for me were big insulators and pretty helpful. So, yeah, I like this. You know, we're gonna work on one thing at a time because it's overwhelming.
It is.
When you're in that space and it seems like there's so many things that you need to fix in your life. Where do I start so I don't start at all?
Right.
You know, and then it's just this continuous cycle. So I think the idea of one step at a time. I still felt in pain. I still felt like I was, you know, in essence, like, you know, there's a good chance I'm not gonna get there, but like, I'll try it your way. You know. So.
And that's kind of one of the goals. One of the goals of what we're doing is to install enough hope to kind of get to the next step and the next step and the next step. So picking that one thing, and that was, you know, I was trying to listen for what might be the most important thing to Josh, and he said, I'm so tired. And I could tell, from his body language and the way he was talking, and with what I know about depression, I figured probably his sleep was already compromised, right? And so usually if we can address a physical symptom so that the person can start feeling just a little bit better, and he gave a lot of cues. He talked about pot, he talked about drinking and melatonin. All those things together make for really unrestful sleep, right? So he's probably really feeling tired. So just kind of picking that one thing that you think you can help the person get even just a little bit of relief from. When I was working on the suicide and crisis hotline, sometimes getting a person to go take a hot bath was a really big deal. Like they would come back and call me an hour later and have a little bit of pep so that we could actually have a conversation and do some more planning. So some important steps in terms of what you might want to do in a session like this. One is to empathize, not, we don't want to come in and say, oh, things will get better tomorrow. We don't know that. We can't make that promise. Josh's reality may go on for years. It's a depressing Josh. In your character person, but empathize, and there have been times when I've told a client, I can tell that your life really sucks right now and I'm sorry. And so I want us to take one little piece of it and see what we can work on. Listening, just giving him, there was a moment for me as the therapist where I really wanted to jump in and try to rescue him, and I had to sit there and say, no, I'm going to wait until he cues me that I can talk. Right? So listening, because oftentimes when we're uncomfortable, our instinct is to cut the person off so that we can move away from that uncomfortable topic. So sitting with the person and listening and being uncomfortable, they're uncomfortable telling you. So being uncomfortable with them is part of it. And then, especially in a situation like this where you have an existing relationship with the client, you have things to draw on that they've told you that could be their reasons to live. They're things that I really don't want to think about what it's going to be like for that person, or I know that I'm key in this other thing. And if you have nothing else to hang on to with the client, the fact that they're in there with you talking says that they haven't completely decided, right? So hang on to that. And help them make that plan to live, even if it's just, I have had clients where we make a plan to live for 2 or 3 hours, right? Until one of their social supports come, or until they can come into the office, whatever it is. So make that plan to live. It's not a contract to live. It's a plan to live for the next few hours, days, etc., so that we can continue to work on baby steps. And then another thing would be to kind of step up the plan for what they're going to do. Once a week isn't going to work for this person, right? They're going to need more than that. So if you can see them more frequently, if you can get them connected to their hotline, there's the national hotline for suicide crisis. Depending on where you are, there are local hotlines. So trying to bring in their supports, their family, their friends, and I would say very importantly, have conversations with those people, because they are not equipped to deal with this. They don't know what to do. And they may have been inadvertently making it worse, right? So there are conversations to be had around those things. But this is just to give you kind of an initial idea of what you want, or what is a good plan of action to take. And it never hurts. Once you get your client to a point where they're like, okay, we're going to do these few things, then you go to your supervisor and you start calling other people. The National Suicide Hotline, I was trained. I used to work on it, and those counselors are actually trained to also help you. I have this client. This is what's going on. What are some things I can do? They're trained to help you. They're trained to help those family members. So we got to ask for help too. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things that come to mind. One is, when empathizing, I think we want to be careful about not flipping that into like sympathy. Like, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's more like an I statement or a thinking statement, rather, like, or you must feel like this or whatever. It's not like, I feel so bad for you. Like, that's awful. Like, because nobody really wants somebody to really feel bad for them. The other piece I'm thinking of,
can't remember if I had this conversation with you or somebody else, but it's this effect that faith is an interesting insulator, and so it could depend on the background you have with the client, but what do you think happens after you die? You know, what do you think? What you don't know? What do you think? What could happen? And you might get a gauge as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing in their mind, and proceed accordingly. And if it doesn't work, recalibrate. But I think that in my experience, and with some of the people I've come in contact with, I think that's been a very big new revelation for me. You know, so I think those are probably the two things I looked at.
Thank you.